Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Black Jewelries and join us for more powerful.
Bye. This coffee is cold. Then leave. This lounge is not for people like you. Sit where you're told.
Yo.
Marcus Bessem reached the entrance of the Sterling Flatislund 9:12 in the morning on a Tuesday when Denver International Airport was thick with delayed connections and short tempers. Bye. He wore a charcoal quarter zip over a plain white undershirt, dark selvage jeans, and clean leather sneakers that had clearly been resoled at least once. Bye. A brown leather satchel, worn soft at the corners but never dirty, hung from his right shoulder. Nothing about him announced money. Bye. Nothing about him announced poverty either. He simply looked like a man who had somewhere to be, and no interest in performing for anyone along the way. Bye. He joined the priority line behind a family arguing about a missed connection, waited without checking his watch, and then held his phone toward the young woman at the podium. Naomi Field scanned the boarding pass. The screen turned a clean, uncomplicated green. First-class access confirmed. Good morning, Mr. Bellamy. Bye. Welcome to Sterling Crest. She had barely finished the sentence when a second voice sliced across the counter. One moment. Bye. Renata Voss stepped out from behind the marble reception desk, her navy blazer pressed to a shine, a small gold crest pinned above her heart. Bye. Her eyes moved first to Marcus's sneakers, then to the crease of his jeans, then to the satchel, and only after all of that, almost as an afterthought, to his face. Bye. I'll need a photo ID. Marcus handed it over without comment. But Renata Stada photographed 2 full seconds longer than the moment required, then compared it to the card that had purchased the ticket, then looked up again as though checking for a lie she hadn't yet located. Bye. The system already confirmed my access, Marcus said evenly. We've had some issues lately. Renata's voice was smooth, almost pleasant, the kind of pleasant that has a blade folded somewhere inside it. Bye. People using information that isn't theirs. Marcus glanced past her shoulder at Naomi's screen. The green confirmation was still sitting there, untouched, unbothered. Bye. What else do you need? The confirmation email, your physical membership card. Possibly the original payment method. Naomi looked toward her manager. Bye. His pass and his profile match, she said quietly. Renata did not turn to face her. I'll decide when verification is complete. Bye. The line behind Marcus had grown past 15 people. A man in a rumpled suit checked his phone twice, sighing loud enough to be heard. Bye. At the next podium over, a white traveler in a hooded sweatshirt and gym shorts lifted his phone. The agent glanced at the screen and waved him through without a second look. Bye. Behind him, a woman gave only her last name and a smile, and was waved through just as fast, her husband laughing about the terrible airport coffee the whole way in. Bye. Marcus watched them pass, then turned back to Renata. Do these extra steps apply to every guest? Something tightened almost invisibly at the corner of Renata's mouth. Bye. Our staff exercises professional judgment to protect member privacy and the premium experience. Professional judgment, Marcus repeated quietly, the way a man repeats a phrase he intends to remember later, word for word. Bye. Renata finally returned his license. You understand why we have to be careful. He understood more than she knew. Bye. He had stood in rooms like this one before, rooms where proof stopped being proof, the instant it belonged to a black man who hadn't dressed for the occasion of being believed. Bye. One phone call could have ended this in 90 seconds. One name, spoken aloud, would have filled the doorway with apologies inside a heartbeat. Bye. But that call would only ever teach Renata Voss how to recognize one powerful man. It would tell him nothing about how she treated everyone else who walked through that door without a name that mattered to her. Bye. She lifted her tablet. Her thumb moved once across the glass. A small orange tag blinked into existence beside his name. Bye. Manual Review Service Monitoring. Naomi saw it too. Something flickered across her face, fear, brief and unmistakable, before she dropped her eyes back to the counter. Bye. Marcus filed that reaction away beside Renata's name, the exact time on the clock behind the desk, and the phrase professional judgment. Bye. All right, Renata said, as though she were granting a favor rather than honoring a paid ticket. You may enter. Bye. She turned to a young attendant hovering near the entrance. Take him to the annex. The attendant hesitated. Bye. The main room still has open tables. The annex. Marcus lifted his satchel strap and stepped through. Above the doorway, brushed steel letters spelled Sterling Crest. Bye. He had chosen that name himself 22 years earlier because he wanted every traveler who passed beneath it to feel received, not measured. Bye. This morning, the letters looked less like a welcome and more like a question Boulding wanted to answer honestly. Who did this place actually believe deserved to walk beneath them? Bye. What Renata Voss did not know, what nobody in that lounge, except one man in an unmarked car outside, knew, was that the acquired land traveler she had just flagged for monitoring was Marcus Bellamy, founder and a majority owner of Crest Hospitality Group, the company that still held final say over every property carrying that name. Bye. He had not come to Denver to win an argument at a reception desk. He had come to learn what happened to people who could not simply call the chairman when the rules quietly changed the moment they walked in. Bye. 4 days earlier, Marcus had been alone in his Denver office at 11:40 at night, 2 documents laid side by side beneath a single desk lamp. Bye. The first was the Sterling Crest Denver Quarterly Report. 97% guest satisfaction, 0 significant food safety incidents. The lowest complaint volume of any location in the region. Bye. At the bottom of the final page, Renata Voss had been nominated for the company's annual leadership award. Everything about it looked clean. Bye. Almost too clean, in the way a floor looks too clean right after it's finished sweeping something under a rug. Bye. He opened the second document, a complaint the Denver team had already closed out 3 weeks earlier. A black first-class passenger had written that staff asked him 3 separate times whether the ticket truly belonged to him, despite his showing identification boarding pass. And the exact card used for purchasing. Bye. None of that appeared in the internal summary. The official read only. Guest appeared unusually sensitive to routine verification. Bye. Marcus read the sentence twice. The words were careful. That made them worse. They had erased the repeat questioning entirely and replaced it with a flaw in the guest's personality. Bye. He opened a second complaint. A black physician wrote that she had been seated near a service corridor despite open window tables sitting empty 20 feet away. Bye. When she asked why, an attendant had noted her in the system as confrontational. Attached to her complaint was a 9-second video clip. Bye. Marcus pressed play. Her voice on the recording was quiet, almost apologetic. She never raised it once. She simply asked whether her ticket included misses to the main room and waited while a manager talked around the question instead of answering it. Bye. Nothing on that recording matched the word confrontational. Then came the anonymous email. No greeting, no request for money. 1 line. On inspection. Bye. They will swap the food, delete the records, and move the inventory before you see it. Sit near service door 3, morning shift. Bye. Attached was a single photograph, a sealed case of imported salmon being wheeled through a service hallway, stamped on morning when Denver's inventory logs claimed every case in its shipment had already been opened and served on the lounge floor. Bye. Marcus studied the image for a long time, the shipping label, the sleeve of the employee's uniform, the reflection caught faintly in the steel door. Bye. Troubling. Not proof. A transfer could have been authorized. A timestamp could have been mistaken. He had built this company on the discipline of never confusing suspicion with fact. Bye. He needed to see it himself, and he needed to see it as nobody, not as the man whose name was bolted above the door. Bye. He crossed to a cabinet near the window, On the top shelf sat his current travel cases, monogrammed and immaculate. By. Below them, a worn leather satchel he hadn't had in years, the one he had carried at 24, working overnight shifts at a hotel loading dock outside Baltimore, saving every spare dollar and studying operations manuals on his breaks. By. He remembered wearing that same bag the morning after his first promotion, walking through property's front doors in his new management badge, only to have the desk supervisor point him toward the loading entrance and tell him deliveries belonged around back. By. She apologized only after another manager called him by name. He had gone home angry that night. His father had listened without feeding the anger. By. Don't ever let people decide how much respect you're owed based on how expensive you look, his father told him. By. Marcus never forgot it. He lifted the old satchel down, brushed the dust from the strap, and booked a 8-day first-class ticket through Denver under his own legal name, a name that meant nothing to anyone who hadn't read the company's incorporation papers. By. Only his compliance director, Daniel Marsh, knew the full purpose of the trip. Daniel, food safety officer Dr. Hannah Pierce, and 2 specialists would be waiting in a nearby concourse, ready to move the moment he called, invisible until then. By. If the lounge operated the way its reports claimed, no one would ever need to know who had walked through. By. If it didn't, he wanted to witness the failure honestly, before a title had the chance to frighten it into hiding. By. Back in the present, Marcus followed the young attendant past the bright main room, where the marble gave way to a thinner, darker carpet, and the windows disappeared behind a low partition. By. Each step carried him farther from the buffet and closer to the low mechanical hum of a service corridor. Then he saw a gray steel door stamped with a black numeral 3. By. The chair the attendant pointed him toward sat directly across from him. Marcus lowered his satchel beside the seat and studied the door for a moment before sitting. By. The anonymous sender had told him exactly where to be. Renata Voss, without knowing it, had placed him in the best possible seat in the building. By. The attendant called it the annex, a careful corporate word for a room nobody wanted to name honestly. The carpet here was worn thin near the aisle. By. 2 outlets bore small yellow out-of-surface stickers. The chairs faced a blank interior wall instead of the runway. By. Service carts rattled past every few minutes, and the employee restroom door sat directly across from the seating. This was not a quieter version of the main lounge. By. This was a room where guests were assigned, not welcomed. Marcus set his satchel down and began to watch. A black airport maintenance technician sat 3 chairs away, still in his reflective work uniform, a first-class boarding pass resting face up on the table in front of him. By. Nearby, a nurse in a Navy hospital jacket, her name tag read R. Carter, had been seated well away from the empty window tables. By. Across the narrow aisle, a Latino businessman named Diego Alvarez balanced a document case on his knees because the nearest shelf had been broken for what looked like weeks. By. An older black veteran with a connection folder tucked beneath his arm sat quietly near the wall, saying nothing to anyone. By. Every one of them had cleared the entrance scanner. Every one of them had been walked, without explanation, to this side of the room. By. A few minutes later, 3 young men in matching booking gym sweatshirts and running shoes walked in, laughing about a fantasy football trade. By. No one examined their clothing. No one mentioned the annex. An attendant smiled and waved them toward any open table near the buffet they liked. By. One of them dropped a duffel bag on a second chair while a server brought him coffee before he'd even asked for it. By. Clothing, Marcus noted, was clearly not the rule here. The meaning someone chose to assign a person wearing it that was the rule. By. Naomi Fields came by a few minutes later, a small tray in her hands, and set a glass of water in front of Marcus without being asked. By. I'm sorry about what happened at the entrance, she said, barely above a whisper. Marcus glanced toward the main podium, where Renata stood reviewing something on her tablet. By. What does the orange tag actually mean? Naomi's hand paused on the tray. You saw that? I was standing right in front of the screen. Bye. She glanced over her shoulder before answering. Management uses it for guests they want staff to keep an eye on. Bye. Keep an eye on how? Naomi pressed her lips together for a long second, as though weighing whether to retreat behind the safety of policy language. Bye. Then she didn't. We're told not to offer the reserve menu unless they specifically ask for it. We're supposed to log how long they stay. Bye. If they question a rule, we note it. If they approach another guest, we notify a manager immediately. What qualifies someone for the tag in the first place? Bye. There isn't a written standard. Then what do they actually tell you? She looked down at the glass she'd just poured. Bye. Doesn't match the profile. Needs extra observation. Doesn't look like a usual guest. Her discomfort deepened before the last part left her mouth. Bye. Sometimes they say the appearance doesn't match the booking level. Marcus kept still, but something behind his eyes tightened. Bye. Have you ever reported that? Naomi inhaled like she was about to answer. Renata appeared at her shoulder before the words could arrive. Bye. Is there a problem? Mr. Bellamy asked about the service code, Naomi said. Renata's expression stayed level, but her voice dropped 4 degrees. Bye. Guests don't require explanations of internal procedure. She turned to Marcus. Those systems exist to protect everyone's comfort. Bye. Whose comfort, exactly? Marcus asked. Renata held his stare for half a second, then lowered her tablet slightly enough for the angle to catch and briefly reveal his own profile on the screen. His name, the orange tag, and beneath it, a note in small type. Bye. Presentation should make confirm behavior before extended surface. Renata locked the screen a beat too late. Marcus did not accuse her of anything. Bye. He did not reach for his phone. Anger would have shrunk the moment down to a single offensive line on a screen. Bye. What he'd just seen was bigger than that a private assumption had been typed into a company system, dressed up in professional language, and turned into a sheet of instructions other employees were now expected to follow without question. Bye. Zayas no longer had to announce itself out loud. It had simply become to. The food arrived 12 minutes later, without apology. Bye. A chicken sandwich sat under loose paper, warm only at its very center. The lettuce had gone dark and soft at the edges. Bye. Cloudy liquid pooled beneath a fruit cup. The coffee had already formed skin, and the yogurt cup carried no date label at all, just a small ring of dried adhesive where one had clearly been peeled away. Bye. 30 feet across the room, an attendant restocked a silver platter of smoked smokesman and refilled a basket of warm pastries beneath soft white lighting. Bye. The contrast was too deliberate to be a rushed morning. Marcus had written this company's first food safety manual himself, back when it operated 3 lounges total. Bye. He didn't need to taste the sandwich to know exactly what had gone wrong with it. He photographed the tray, logged the time, the table number, and the condition of every item on his phone. Bye. One careless tray could be an accident. A removed date label was not an accident, it was intent. The steel door marked 3 opened across from him. Bye. A stock supervisor named Dean Whitfield pushed a loaded service cart into the corridor with the easy confidence of a man who had done this exact walk many times before. Bye. The 3 sealed cases sat on the cart: premium salmon, imported cheese, bakery goods carrying the exact brands listed on the company's own invoices. Bye. Dean passed each barcode beneath a wall scanner. A green message blinked. Transferred to surface floor. The cart did not turn toward the buffet. Bye. It went straight through the service door instead. Through the gap, Marcus watched a man in a local event company jacket check the labels and roll the cases onto a second cart. Bye. No envelope changed hands. On the surface, it looked routine. Then Dean's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, deleted the notification without reading past the first line, and walked back inside. Bye. Minutes later, another employee carried a card box into the secondary stockroom, a discount distributor's logo Marcus had never once approved. Bye. The contents matched the size of what was ending up on annex trays, but not a single brand on the box matched anything in company records. Bye. The pattern was sharpening fast. Crest Hospitality was paying for premium inventory. Part of it left through door 3 and never came back. Bye. The main buffet kept just enough of the real product to survive an inspection, while guests marked for monitoring quietly absorbed the cheap substitutes. Bye. Dean Whitfield was using the unbiased classification system as camouflage betting correctly that complaints from the annex would be edited away before anyone senior ever read them. Bye. Nearby, the nurse, Renee Carter, lifted her fruit cup and frowned. "This smells fermented," she said quietly to a passing attendant. Bye. The attendant didn't smell it, didn't check the seal, didn't call the kitchen. She opened her tablet and typed. Marcus could read the screen from where he sat. Dissatisfied with presentation. Bye. No safety issue observed. A possible food safety warning had just been renamed as a matter of personal taste, without anyone lifting a thermometer. Bye. Marcus rose with his empty water glass and drifted toward the self-service station near the corridor, moving without urgency, close enough to keep the front desk within earshot. Bye. Dean Whitfield stood beside a nervous new hire, one finger tapping the complaint screen. "Never write unsafe unless someone's actually been examined," Dean was saying. Bye. "Don't write discrimination, don't write spoiled, and don't write uneven verification. Those words trigger compliance automatically. What should I put instead?" Bye. The new hire asked. Dean tapped the menu. Guest satisfied with presentation. Guest misunderstood benefits. Emotional response. Keep it operational, not accusatory even when that isn't what they actually said. Bye. Your job is to record the outcome, not repeat every word a guest uses. Marcus refilled his glass and passed close enough to catch the nurse's complaint, still open on the screen. Bye. Her original words, "fruit smelled fermented," were visible for exactly 1 second before Dean clicked edit. 2 minutes later, the record read, "Guest dissatisfied with menu selection." Bye. No product concern verify. A warning had not been investigated. It had been translated into something harmless until nothing dangerous remained in it at all. Bye. From the main room came a loud male voice, a white traveler, complaining that his coffee had taken 10 minutes, his voice pitched to carry across half the lounge. Bye. An attendant apologized, brought a fresh cup, and quietly added bonus loyalty points to his profile. No manager appeared. No behavior note was ever opened. Bye. His frustration became a service recovery opportunity. The nurse's quiet concern, minutes earlier, had to become a reason to monitor her. Bye. 2 guests, 2 complaints, 2 entirely different versions of the same building. Naomi returned with a fresh pitcher and, as she refilled Marcus's glass, slid a folded slip of paper beneath it. Bye. Her hand trembled once before steadying. She waited until she'd moved 2 tables away before Marcus unfolded it. 4 internal case numbers, written in small, careful print. Bye. One about missing date labels. One about extra verification demanded almost exclusively from black guests. One about Dean altering inventory records after deliveries. Bye. One about Renata closing complaints before regional compliance could ever see them. Naomi came back a minute later, pretending to check the napkin holder. Bye. "Those are mine," she said quietly. "Why did you stay after everything you've seen?" Marcus asked. She looked out at the annex, the nurse, the nurse, the technician, the businessman with the broken shelf, the veteran with his folder, all seated exactly where staff believed fewer people would notice them. Bye. "Because if everyone who knows the truth leaves," she said, "there's nobody left here to tell guests they're not imagining it." Bye. There was no heroism in her voice, only fatigue and a stubborn, unglamorous sense of duty that Marcus recognized instantly, because he'd built his entire career on the same instinct. Bye. Before he could ask anything else, Renata arrived. Naomi slipped back toward the podium. "Employees are prohibited from sharing internal material with guests," Renata said. Bye. "She brought me water," Marcus said. Renata's stare stayed on Naomi's back a moment too long, then swung toward the still complaining traveler at the coffee station. Bye. Marcus followed her gaze. Are black guests more often described as confrontational here? He asked. We don't see race, Renata said. Bye. We evaluate behavior. Where's his behavior note? Marcus nodded at the man now lightly slapping the counter, demanding a manager. Bye. Renata had no answer for that. The doors opened, and Walter and Frutusincre walked in together. Walter, silver-haired and tall, leaned carefully on a cane. Bye. Ruth stayed close enough to steady him without ever quite touching his elbow, the practiced grace of 40 years of marriage. Bye. Their passes scanned green. Renata looked at the canes, then at Ruth's plain travel coat, then at both of their faces, and never once at the main room's open window tables. Bye. Seat them in the annex, she told an attendant. It'll be more appropriate. The eye narrowed sharply near the partition, forcing Walter to turn sideways and lift his cane over a service cart's wheel. Bye. His jaw tightened for half a second, not enough to become a complaint, only enough for Ruth to notice and quietly rest her hand beneath his arm. Bye. Could we sit over there instead? Ruth asked, nodding toward the empty window seats. My husband needs a little more room. Bye. The attendant glanced toward Renata before entering. Those tables are reserved for priority guests. Ruth looked down at the boarding passes still open on her phone first class, both of them, and made the tired, familiar decision not to spend her morning proving what the scanner had already confirmed twice. Bye. All right, she said, and helped Walter into his seat. A tray arrived soon after. Marcus recognized it immediately, the same lukewarm sandwich, the same wilted lettuce, the same cloudy fruit cup and skinned-over coffee. Bye. Walter reached into his jacket for a small medication case. I'm supposed to eat before I take these, he told Ruth, unwrapping the sandwich. Bye. Marcus was on his feet before he'd finished, deciding to move. He crossed the aisle slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. Bye. Sir, please don't eat that yet. My tray came from the same batch, and it showed clear signs of improper storage. Bye. Walter's hand froze mid-motion. Ruth leaned in, caught the sour edge beneath the sweetness of the fruit, and pushed the whole tray away without another word. Bye. Marcus raised a hand toward the nearest attendant. Please bring a food thermometer and check the date labels on this batch before anything else is served from it. Bye. Renata appeared almost instantly. She didn't examine the sandwich. She didn't ask Ruth what she'd smelled. Her eyes went straight to Marcus, as if the danger in the room had simply walked itself up and stood in front of her in a charcoal quarter zip. Bye. Mr. Bellamy, return to your seat. You need to stop approaching other guests. He didn't bother us, Ruth said sharply. Bye. He stopped my husband from eating something that smells spoiled. Renata barely glanced at her. We've received several concerns about Mr. Bellamy's behavior since he arrived. Bye. Concerns from whom? Marcus asked. I'm not required to identify other guests. Then identify the behavior. Bye. Renata's jaw tightened. You've approached people uninvited. You've created tension. You've challenged staff and refused direction. Which of those created a safety risk? Bye. She had no answer for that either. Only labels, none of them specific. Walter looked between them at the untouched tray. Bye. The food still hasn't been checked. Naomi stepped forward from the podium, pale but steady. We need to stop serving that batch until someone verifies the temperature. Bye. Renata turned on her. Are you taking a guest's side against your own manager? Naomi swallowed hard, fear crossing her face, and then settling into something firmer underneath it. Bye. I'm taking the side of what's safe. The annex went dead quiet. Renata lifted her radio. Call airport security. Bye. Mr. Bellamy is interfering with staff and encouraging insubordination. Marcus felt the last piece of the picture drop into place. Bye. He had let Renata question him, isolate him, downgrade his food, tag his profile, because he needed to know exactly how far this system reached before he shut it down. Bye. He could not, would not, let Walter Sinclair become part of that evidence. Observation ended the moment another person's health was on the line. Bye. 2 airport security officers arrived within minutes, calm and measured. Renata pointed at Marcus before either could ask a single question. That's the man causing the disturbance. Marcus stood in the center of the annex, hands open at his sides, the unsafe tray still sitting on the table behind him. Ma'am, tell us exactly what happened, one officer said. Renata drew herself up. This guest refused staff direction, approached other members without permission, and created a tense environment. Smooth, complete, built from the exact same language as her complaint system. She left out his valid first-class ticket. She left out the orange tag she'd added herself. She left out the uninspected tray, Ruth's statement, Naomi's warning. Am I accused of threatening anyone? Marcus asked the officer. No one said that. Has anyone claimed I touched them? No. Did anyone hear me raise my voice? Silence answered before the officer did. Not that I'm aware of. Marcus gestured to Walter's tray. Then what policy stops a guest from warning another guest about food that shows signs of unsafe storage? This isn't a courtroom, Renata snapped. No, Marcus said. It's a lounge serving food to the public. That requires clearer answers than this. The second officer looked at the tray. Has anyone actually checked the temperature? Renata's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Marcus took out his phone and called Daniel Marsh, who picked up on the first ring. Marcus, lock all guest record editing privileges at Denver, effective immediately. Preserve 120 days of camera footage. Suspend transactions tied to this location's food vendors. No inventory leaves through service door 3. Stop food service now. Arrange access at the partner lounge and refund every guest's access fee for today. Whitfield, standing near the kitchen entrance, turned sharply toward the corridor at the word service door 3. One of the officers stepped smoothly into his path without touching him. Sir, that area is being preserved for review. Please stay outside it. Dean stopped. His expression tightened, then went carefully, deliberately blank. Renata stared at Marcus. Who exactly do you think you are, giving orders in my facility? He ended the call without answering her. Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus made clear that no one was to be detained, searched, or have their belongings taken without lawful cause. His instructions were about preserving evidence, not punishing anyone. On the spot. Stockroom, management systems, and service files were to remain untouched until his compliance team arrived. He asked Naomi to help move the remaining guests calmly to the partner lounge. He asked Ruth whether Walter felt dizzy or unwell and offered to bring airport medical staff if needed. Walter said he was steady, just hungry. Marcus found a sealed package from an approved vending kiosk, checked the label himself, and handed it over. Renata watched her lounge reorganize itself around a man's instructions without a single one of her own being followed. The guest she had marked for monitoring 3 hours earlier now sounded less like a complaint waiting to happen, and more like the person ultimately responsible for every risk in the building. Daniel Marsh arrived with Dr. Hira Pierce and 2 compliance specialists carrying evidence cases. He took in one sweep up the officer with tray, Dean near the Renata by the podium. Marcus, standing beside the Sinclairs, then spoke loud enough for the whole room to hear. Mr. Bellamy, editing access is locked. All Denver camera files are under preservation. Senior leadership has been notified and is waiting for your report. The lounge went silent. Renata looked from Daniel to Marcus to the crest mounted on the wall behind her. I didn't know who you were, she said, her voice suddenly much smaller than it had been all morning. My ticket told you everything you needed to know to do your job correctly, Marcus said. Dr. Pierce opened her case, inserted a calibrated thermometer into Walter's sandwich, and waited. The reading settled well outside the safe range. Nobody spoke. His identity had changed the room. It had not changed the one fact that actually mattered. Walter Sinclair had nearly eaten unsafe food. Staff said he belonged in the part of the lounge where lower standards could be hidden from anyone who might care. Daniel moved first, halting new admissions and arranging immediate access at a partner lounge 2 concourses over. Crest's hospitality would cover sealed meals, transportation assistance, and every access fee charged that morning. Bye. No one was asked to wait for an apology before receiving help. Marcus stayed beside Walter while an airport medic checked his blood pressure, found no immediate interest, and confirmed he could safely take his medication once he'd eaten something sealed and verified. Bye. Ruth's hand didn't leave his shoulder until the medic finished. Across the room, Dr. Pierce worked through the annex trays and the secondary stockroom with quiet, methodical efficiency. Bye. The sandwiches had been held well outside approved temperature range. Multiple yogurt cups and packaged salads carried no date labels at all. Bye. Product brands in the cooler did not match a single purchasing invoice Daniel pulled from the system. Renata's composure finally cracked, just slightly. Bye. This is being made to look worse than it was. Everything we did was to protect the premium experience. Bye. Marcus turned to face her fully. Why did the guests who walked in behind me get through without any additional identification? Bye. Every interaction is different. Why were black guests with valid access repeatedly placed in the annex while bum tables sat empty in the main room? Bye. We make seating decisions based on operational judgment. Why was a food safety complaint rewritten as dissatisfaction with presentation? Bye. Renata's eyes searched for Daniel, hoping for a safer target. Staff have to interpret what guests mean. People describe things emotionally. Bye. Marcus unlocked the tablet Daniel had preserved and held the screen toward her. Presentation Mikmayan. Confirm behavior before extended surface. Bye. That's not behavior, he said. That's how you saw me before I'd done anything at all. Dean stepped forward before the silence could turn fully toward him. Bye. The cases through door 3 were excess inventory. We transferred them to a partner event so they wouldn't go to waste. Bye. Daniel checked the transaction log. The system says those cases went to the lounge service floor. Someone must have entered the wrong code. Bye. Where's the transfer order? There should be one. I'd have to check. Record his answer, Marcus told Daniel. Bye. Compare it against camera footage and vendor payments. Dean started to say something else, thought that better of it, and said nothing at all. Bye. Are you firing us right here? Renata asked. Marcus studied her for a moment. She seemed almost braced for public humiliation, as if that were the only language of authority she truly understood. Bye. You and Mr. Whitfield are suspended from all company systems and operational duties, pending investigation. You'll receive written instructions, access to the evidence used against you, and the opportunity to respond with representation. Bye. Renata blinked. After what you think I did, fair process isn't reserved for people I agree with. Bye. Near the podium, Naomi stood very still. Mr. Bellamy, I gave you those case notes. She was right about that much, at least. Bye. Preserve Miss Field's schedule, pay, and personnel file, Marcus told Daniel. No changes without compliance approval. Naomi's mouth opened slightly, perhaps braced for an instant promise for promotion or protection beyond what she'd actually earned. Bye. Marcus gave her neither. You'll be interviewed like everyone else, he said. What you reported gets weighed on the evidence, the same as anything else. Bye. She nodded, and Smith surfed her shoulder left her short first time that morning. Before leaving for the partner lounge, Ruth paused beside the annex partition, her eyes moving over the worn carpet, the narrow aisle, the tables where certain guests had been quietly set apart from everyone else. Bye. You didn't need to own this place for what happened here to be wrong, she told Marcus. I know, he said. Bye. That's exactly why this couldn't end with one manager, one stolen ship, or one bad morning. The investigation ran 5 days at first, then widened fast. Bye. By the second day, Daniel Marsh understood failure went far beyond a single unsafe tray and one dishonest supervisor. Bye. The team pulled 120 days of camera footage, 14 months of inventory records, complaint histories, staff schedules, and vendor payments across the entire property. By. The service door recordings told the story in patient, repetitive detail. Dean Whitfield moved premium salmon, imported cheese, fresh produce, and bakery cases through door 3 during quiet stretches, again and again, over months. By. The shipments went to an event company run by a longtime acquaintance, which later resold the food at private receptions, while Crest Hospitality's own records showed those exact products had supposedly been served on the lounge floor. By. Investigators eventually traced $187, $442.60 in missing inventory and inflated invoices. Dean had avoided large transfers on purpose. Small electronic payments, gift cards, false consulting invoices, and vendor refunds scattered across a dozen accounts. By. No single payment looked dramatic. Together they formed a pattern far too precise to be anyone's honest mistake. Complete records revealed something even deeper. By. More than 140 get reports had been deleted, closed under the wrong category, or quietly rewritten, until the original concern simply disappeared. By. Repeated identification checks became sensitivity to routine verification. Sour food became dissatisfaction with prestige. A calm question about seating became confrontational behavior. By. Daniel's team cross-referenced the language against camera footage. Most of the guests labeled difficult had never once raised their voice. By. Several had stayed seated the entire time while a manager stood over them. Travelers holding the exact same ticket class and chair as white travelers were flagged for additional verification at a rate more than 6 times higher. By. They were also directed to the annex far more often and received the restricted menu at nearly triple the rate. By. White guests who complained loudly, meanwhile, were almost always offered points, drinks, or a personal apology, with no behavior note ever added to their file at all. By. The data made one thing painfully clear. The language wasn't neutral. It changed depending on who was speaking and who was writing it down. By. The annex had become part of the scheme in a very deliberate way. Cheaper substitute food appeared there more often, because staff had learned that complaints from tables could be minimized or quietly rewritten before anyone senior ever saw them. By. Renata Voss had never taken $1 from Dean's operation, but the investigation found she had personally approved the guest classification practices, permitted complaint edits, ignored repeated food safety warnings, cut Naomi's schedule after her early reports, and submitted false performance summaries to the regional office. By. Her polished reports hadn't hidden chaos. They had protected it. After the formal evidence review and response period, Dean with the employment was terminated, and the financial records were referred to the appropriate authorities for further examination. By. Renata was dismissed as well for discriminatory treatment, concealment of complaints, inaccurate reporting, retaliation, and failure to act on documented food safety risks. By. A regional manager who had received one of Naomi's earlier reports and never opened an investigation lost supervisory responsibility entirely. By. Marcus refused to treat every employee as equally responsible. Staff who had altered records, hidden food, or knowingly aided the scheme faced discipline based on the evidence against them specifically. By. Employees who had simply followed instructions without participating in the fraud were interviewed separately, retrained, and placed under review, instead of terminated outright. By. Some admitted quietly that they had been afraid to speak up. Marcus didn't excuse that fear. He also didn't confuse it with theft. By. Naomi's full 5-shift schedule was restored, along with back pay for every hour she'd lost, and the unfair warning was removed permanently from her personnel file. By. She was invited to help redesign the company's guest reporting process from the ground up. Marcus met with her privately once the review closed. By. What matters isn't that you helped me, he told her. It's that you told the truth back when you thought I was just another passenger. By. She lowered her eyes for a moment, relief moving across her face, tangled up with the exhaustion of some who had finally been believed after months of no one listening. She wasn't handed a senior title overnight. Instead, she became a service integrity coordinator, working under an experienced director, and entered a year-long leadership program. Standing outside the closed Denver lounge weeks later, Daniel turned to Marcus. "We could rename the location. Give it some distance from all of this." Marcus looked up at the steel letters still bolted above the door. He remembered exactly how they'd looked the morning Renata questioned whether he had any right to be standing beneath them. "Changing the letters would be the easy part," he said. "Keeping the name means we actually have to make it true." The lounge stayed closed for 6 weeks. Contractors tore out the partition, dividing the annex from the main room, replaced the worn carpet, widened the narrow aisle, fixed the dead outlets, and turned the entire section to face the windows. Every food case was scanned at the stockroom entrance, again at the service floor, and once more before it left the building at all. In the training room, staff practiced logging specific words and actions, while a second reviewer checked every complaint before it could be closed. The old presentation mismatch and service monitoring labels were gone from the system entirely, deleted at the code level so no one could quietly bring them back. Walter and Ruth Sinclair attended Aulu before the reopening. Nobody asked them to pose for photographs beneath the company crest or praise the renovation. Ruth compared 2 printed menus and asked whether a guest seated in the rear would get the exact same food as a guest by the windows. Same access, same quality, the new manager told her, every time. "Keep it that way," Ruth said. Walter tested the widened aisle with his cane and chose a chair with firm armrests near the window. "People shouldn't have to explain their bodies before a room becomes usable to them," he said. His comment ended up changing the final layout of the seating area. On reopening morning, Naomi Field stood behind the very podium where Marcus's ticket had once been doubted for 20 minutes over nothing. Her uniform hadn't changed. Her name badge had beneath her name, in smaller letters, it now read, Surface Integrity Coordinator. Marcus walked in without warning, wearing the same charcoal quarter zip, dark jeans, and the old leather satchel, resoled sneakers and all. No assistant walked beside him. No executive had called ahead. Naomi recognized him instantly, but she didn't summon a manager or open some private lane for him. She simply held out her hand for his phone. The scanner chimed. The screen turned green. "Welcome to Sterling Crest, Mr. Bellamy." Marcus glanced at the screen. That's it. Naomi allowed herself a small, honest smile. Valid ticket. That's all it's ever supposed to take. Marcus stepped inside. A black maintenance supervisor sat near the windows, eating from the same breakfast menu as 2 men in business suits, 3 tables over. A nurse worked quietly beside a repaired outlet. A white couple in gym sweatshirts walked in behind Marcus and got the exact same greeting, the exact same scan, the exact same choice of any open seat in the room. No one was treated with suspicion that morning. No one was treated like royalty either. The old annex didn't exist anymore. Light reached every table in the room. The aisle ran open and unbroken from the entrance, straight to service door 3. Marcus walked to the chair where he'd first sat weeks earlier and set his satchel down beside it. The steel door was still there, unchanged. Removing it would have been just another way of pretending nothing had ever happened behind it. What had actually changed was everything around it. A camera now covered the entire corridor. Inventory matched every shelf down to the case number, and employees had a real channel to report concerns outside their own local chain of command. There was no hidden corner left where honest people could be quietly isolated and told their own memory was wrong. In the staff hallway, one sentence from Ruth Sinclair had been printed and mounted permanently near the employee entrance. "Respect is not an upgrade benefit." It wasn't hung in the public lounge as marketing. Employees saw it every single before their shift began. whether anyone important was walking through the door that morning or not. Bye. Marcus stood beneath the steel letters one last time before he left. 6 weeks earlier, he had stood in that exact spot, wondering who this company truly believed deserved to pass beneath them. Bye. Now, he thought instead about the people who walked in every day, without titles, without connections, without anyone powerful waiting in the wings to defend them if things went wrong. Bye. A brand doesn't prove what it actually values by how it treats the most recognizable person in the room. It proves it in the moment an employee genuinely believes no one important is watching at all. Bye. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Bye. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. Bye. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.